Welcome viewers to the series of lectures on forests, sustainability and development. This is part 6 in the series of lectures around this theme, and earlier we have discussed several important nodes and milestones of this particular theme ever since the creation of Imperial Forest Department way back in 1864, followed by several forest acts in the colonial period, as well as in the previous lecture we were talking about as to how those colonial legacies carried over well into independent India as well through its policy thrust and no fundamental departure in terms of structure of officialdom and management techniques deployed for forestry and so forth. Now, carrying forward that discussion, let's go back to the first or second decade of the 19th century in the colonial context. As we discussed in the previous discussion, that it's important to remember that even Europe and Americas were undergoing industrial revolution, and they needed a lot of forest resources in terms of timber and several other forest products to fuel the growth paradigm, the industrial growth paradigm on which capitalist development had been undertaken. And this facilitating this seamless supply of forest products for the massive demand generated on account of improvements in communication and transportation technologies, where distant areas could now be connected. And therefore, resources of forests were to be used and harnessed not only for immediate consumption by communities living around it, but the roadways, railways, shipways or waterways had ensured that even distant areas, demands generated from distant areas could now be catered through colonial possessions that the British had here in India, because by around this time, by around the second half of 19th century, so far as forest resources in Europe itself is concerned, or England, Ireland, etc., South Africa, etc., are concerned, they had almost been depleted. So colonies like India were looked at also almost greedily for ensuring supply of forest and timber from Indian forest patches. Now, it's important to pause here and discuss a little bit what industrial mode of resource use entails in terms of rupturing the traditional ways and means by which forest resources were used so far. So there are structural prerequisites of industrial mode of resource use, and that would have taken its toll on forestry and the relation of forests with communities living around it. So the first structural prerequisite of industrial mode of resource use, under which colonialism is operating here in India, is disorienting subsistence use to privilege commercial production and uses. So that's very understandable that the new kind of economic environment in which production and consumption is happening in the second half of 19th century definitely is industrial mode of resource use, and this the satiation or this tremendously improved or tremendously increased, not improved, tremendously increased demand or consumption could be satiated by disorienting subsisting use of forest resources, and privileging commercial production and uses from forest resources. So that's one. The subsistence use of forest resources had to be knocked down in order to allow that to be accessed by commercial needs and commercial requirements. Second is rupturing or delegitimizing community control over resources to allow a free play to the atomized individual. Now, this is individualism. This is no more to be done at community level. So, shared ownership or communal ownership of forest resources becomes a deterrent in this way of exploitation of forest resources in industrial mode of resource use. So, the community control, the community or traditions of community involvement in forest affairs, that had to be ruptured, that had to be delegitimized. So, some parts of Indian history were looked at and they were used as cases to legitimize state control or state ownership of forests and delegitimize community control of forests the way it existed in pre-colonial India. And this was all done so that it is individuals, it is individual farmers. Ownership becomes individualized, and it becomes easy for any agency, it becomes easy to deal with individuals and individual landowners or forest owners as compared to shared ownership of forest resources. That's a difficult proposition for free play of commercial reality of the second half of 19th century, and so that has to be done in a particular way. So that's the second essential or structural prerequisite of industrial mode of resource use. Third is doing away with existing or prevalent restraints on resource exploitation, something that we discussed earlier, that there were sacred groves, there were so many do's and don'ts mandated by the tradition, all ensconced in religion and religiosity or some traditions, at times even expressed through rites and rituals. So they worked as some kind of a mechanism of continued usage of forest resources in traditional terms, ensuring sustainability. And that had to be done away with, because now we are dealing with a situation of enormously increased degree of supplies that are required. So those norms and those traditions had to be dismantled to ensure that forest resources are exploited to the brim. To meet the increased demands on account of industrial mode of resource use. As I discussed in the previous interaction with you on this theme, that the debate that ensues between, say, 1864 or 1865 and 1878, the two forest acts during the colonial times, is redolent of what is being debated in the American and European environmental circles, right? So, if you look at the debate amongst environmentalists or conservatives or conservationists in Europe at around this point of time, we do get to hear of annexationists, pragmatists and populists. So who are they? Annexationists are the ones who are arguing in favor of complete takeover of forest resources by the state in order to facilitate better supply to commercial needs, and if conservation efforts are required, it is the state that will undertake this. And they thought that state will be the best agency to do this, to to ensure supply for commercial needs as well as do conservation, right? So that's one. It's an extreme position that is taken by some people who are debating as to how to go about these conservation and management of forest resources. Before I talk about pragmatists, let's understand what populists are saying. Populists are saying that don't touch the traditional ways and means by which people are managing forests. They have prudence embedded into their practices. So allow that to operate the way they were operating. Don't change the land rights. Don't change the ownership pattern. Don't break the community control and so forth. Which, of course, if you allow the tradition to stay the way they were, obviously it's a populist kind of stance, which is anti-change, and therefore it appears attractive to people, and so that is yet another extreme of position taken by some scholars or some conservationists. And in between the two polarities, you have pragmatists who are saying that, well, both extreme positions have to be reconciled in some way or the other. So yes, don't change the entire fabric in terms of community control. Allow community control to exist in certain areas, but development is also important. Meeting the industrial requirement is also important. Commercial lures are to be catered to allow people to earn profit and so forth. So that's the maxim of capitalism. So that has to be looked into as well. And therefore select some patches of forest or some species of trees and for timber extraction and so forth, and there the control and command of the state should be total. So it's a mix of the two that pragmatists are advocating. And even if you look at the United States of America, which is again industrializing in the second half of 19th century, the environmental philosophies of agrarianism, wilderness thinking, and scientific industrialism, they are all reflection of the same what is happening, what is being debated even here in India through conservation experts that we shall be talking about. Brandes, for example, Baden-Powell of Scouts fame, he's also pitching in this debate and so forth. So if you want to read, students want to read more about it, they can refer to Ramchandra Guha's book, How Much One Should Consume, and that has a beautiful chapter on these issues. Now, as we see the American and European coordinates of this environmental debate, what we find is that embedded in the annexationists or pragmatists policy, or even scientific industrialism approaches to nature in particular, scientific industrialism approach to nature in particular, is the ecological reality of there being benign temperate ecosystem. This is the point that I was referring to in the earlier discussion, that these are the strategies, philosophies developed out of the temperate forest realities, ecological reality of Europe and also of America. The same did not exist. The same was not true for the forests here in India, which are tropical and humid. Right? So scientific forestry, the way it developed, the techniques that were deployed are suited or could be regarded as scientific in the context of temperate forests, not in the tropical humid forests. Because as we discussed earlier, that no scientific survey was undertaken to develop a scientific way to conserve forests in tropical humid conditions, right? So what worked better in those conditions, there is no guarantee that it would have similarly impacted or not impacted or less impacted ecological conditions here in India, because Indian conditions were different. So in India, however, at this juncture, the twin reality of colonialism and tropical ecological conditions served as tangents that were at variance with either Europe or America. So it is not only the distinct tropical ecological reality of Indian forests, but also the reality of colonialism that is different here in India. So India at this point of time in the second half of the 19th century is a colonial country. And what organically developed, say in England, how to start producing from subsistence to profit, right? How people took to this was little more organic, was little more natural and long term. So in England, for example, we get to hear of the putting out system or enclosure movement, and it is through this way that industrialization was undertaken, or production for commercial needs were undertaken. Subsequently, industrialization comes and it transforms things around it, but that's the trajectory that was taken or that was undertaken in England. But India is a colonial country, so there is no concern, there is no organic continuity, or these transformations did not happen organically. It happened at the stroke of an administrative decision. So forestry in colonial times were more of an administrative issue rather than ecological issue, right? So that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Now, yet another difference or point of variance between Europe and America and that of India is that India, unlike Europe and America, had a long civilizational history spanning millennia of customary prudent practices of communal management of forests. And this was something that was not congruent with Europe and America. Now, if some habits, traditions, ways and means, approaches to nature are long embedded in the civilizational history of a particular community or a particular area, then to tinker with it becomes a difficult proposition. It is likely to be more difficult. It cannot be so easily done. Right? So, the long civilizational history of prudent practices of managing forests with the idea of, say, sacred groves or not cutting trees in particular months, all designed, or not killing some animals in their reproductive months. All these are strategies devised to ensure continuity of forests and replenishing of forests. Right? So they are not overtly saying that these are being done with an overt concern for environmentalism. So environmentalism, of course, is a post-industrial kind of phenomena, but certainly concern of environment and ecological balance, etc., were well taken care of through rites and rituals in traditional India and in its long civilizational history. Now, due to industrialization and particularly technological advancements in extractive and transportation sectors, what happens is that several items which otherwise so far found usage in local terms or in subsistence terms or in terms of consumption of the people around that forest, now has acquired commercial value, and they have become commodities which could be freely bought and sold in the market, and transportation communication technology has made it more economical. So it becomes not that costly to commute or to transport commodities, right? So there is that economics also working in favor of harnessing or in favor of exploiting forest resources more harshly as compared to what was being done in the pre-industrial times. So timber or wood, which earlier in traditional terms found usage only in, say, making houses or making some wooden implements or furniture or say some other items of immediate use, some implements, etc. Now, yes, domestic fuel also, but now with the advancement in transport and communication, it became possible to make this timber a commodity that could be used to cater to demands generated from areas far removed from the immediate precincts of that forest to which it was earlier catering to. So that's a very big tumultuous change, I would say, brought about by development in transportation and communication and transformation from immediate use or usage to commercial value that the forests have to take the pressure off. Resultantly, what happens is that the traditionally exercised communal control by the tribals, by the peasants living in the vicinity of that forest, or even the small owners of these lands, that traditionally existing connect between communities and forests came under a lot of stress, right? So the traditional matrix of economic and social relationship operating as they were in a limited consumption precinct of localities and bazaars now are ripped open in the altered benefit to cost ratio lure, and it was the colonial state working in the garb of taking measures towards forest conservation which was facilitating this ownership change by emerging as a prime candidate for the same. So this is the point that I earlier made, that the state is intervening and is becoming the control taker of forest lands and so forth, classifying forests for its own control, and it is imbued with the idea of taking control of forests and so forth, just to ensure that the commercial cost ratio or benefit to cost ratio lure could be operationalized, because with the pre-existing traditional connect between communities and forests, which had a social component to it, with that kind of matrix, with that kind of community matrix, it was just not possible. Commercial exploitation of forest resources was not possible. So that had to be dismantled, and state comes in as some kind of an agency to facilitate this. But the pretense that is given is that of conservation. So talking of the imperial power, say in India's case, Britain, it having devastated its own forests and that of Ireland and South Africa, and also the eastern littorals of the United States of America, to source timber for the burgeoning shipbuilding, iron smelting, besides farming, forest destruction for Britain had become proverbial of its political victory. Now, please understand this, that political victory of Britain in imperial efforts towards creating colonies or embellishing their political control in colonies, taking control of forests or devastating forests in the colony had almost become a marker of British victory, of imperial victory. It was that badly done. And the connect was that evident, that apparent, right? One author that I have quoted here, Stebbing, writing for 1922 to 27 period, and I'm quoting from there, talking about the Royal Navy, British Royal Navy. It says that safety of the empire depended on its wooden walls. So it's an imperial project. Safety of empire depending on the supply of timber, seamless supply of timber from wherever, and obviously colonies were the best suited candidates for that, right? Because they had depleted wooden resources or timber, forest resources in their own homeland, or other colonies, for example, South Africa or the eastern littorals of what went on to become the initial seaboard states of United States of America and so forth. So that is something where we will stop today, and as we meet next, we shall continue with the leftover part of this discussion in the same series of forests, sustainability and development. Thank you.